Last time on a night and its moon, toss a coin to your reaver. Amarus rode away with a strange man and barely spared a single thought for Knox. They went to a city where Amarus found out that she's part fae for the first time. Amarus decided that not Geralt is her dad now, and she suddenly wants to learn how to be a warrior. He takes her to the not Witcher stronghold. Meanwhile, Knox is human trafficked and sold into sexual slavery.
Hi, hello, I'm back, and I once again have ice cream. Don't mind the sound of the dog eating off to the side. She's just hanging out. She's mad because she doesn't get chocolate ice cream, but you see, my chocolate colored ice cream in this white bowl is a metaphor for good and evil somehow. The white bowl can't survive without the ice cream, and if the ice cream didn't have the white bowl, I would just be holding it in my hands. Flawless. I should have written this book. Alright, I know this is going to be a long chapter. I'm going to try not to stop us too often, but you know me, I gotta comment on like everything. I do want to know, each chapter has this like cool design on it, and I'm never brave enough to try to get like graphics into my books because I have enough trouble with formatting, just like regular formatting. Fighting with Amazon, fighting with Word, figuring out what everything wants. I don't pay somebody to format my books because I feel like that's a skill that I can learn myself and do myself, so maybe someday I will put graphics in there. But I'm curious if this author just hired someone or if she's just like way better at fighting with Word and Amazon than I am. We're still with Amarus. We have not gone back to Knox. It felt like the author was really interested in Knox at the beginning of the book and then was like, oh no, never mind. This character is better. I'm gonna follow her. Don't get me wrong, I was not looking forward to the chapters with Knox where we have to watch this girl be forced into sexual slavery, but you know, I also hate Amarus. Here's the thing. The fact that I loathe Amarus is not 100% the book's fault. Just like 99%. I am never going to relate to your character who is the best, the most beautiful, the most special. I'm just never going to relate to that. So if you're writing a book like that, it doesn't really matter how well done it is, which this is not. If you have a character who is the most special, the most anything, the most powerful, the most beautiful, the most special, I'm never going to relate to them. And in fact, they're probably going to make me angry. I also need to have this light on, even though it's annoying for filming. I like to be able to see the book. Just realized how dark it is in here. Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So, all of the men in this fortress, we haven't even got to meet them yet. We're just told that they're arguing over whether she gets to stay in whatever, I'm not going to try to pronounce it. We're going to call it this fortress. And there's like a whole host of reasons. Nobody's even quite sure if it's like tradition or if there's logical reasons. But some arguments took on a medical or anatomical nature. Women couldn't keep up in sparring. Oh, this is awkward. A woman's presence would slow them down the pack on runs. Okay, there's a bit of a typo. But anyway, women had special health needs that the keep was not equipped to meet. And then it says others were more misogynistic in tone. Wait a minute. I'm assuming the special health needs are periods, which just makes me think about when NASA sent like 100 tampons with Sally Ride, I think it was, into space because they had no idea. And that doesn't count as misogynistic? But you think she's going to develop breast cancer while she's here in your fortress? Also, men can get breast cancer too. Also, they basically just say the first point again when they're like the misogynistic reasons are basically women too weak, which they already talked about in the she can't keep up with the sparring and the running. Because we, as the readers, don't know Audrin, like, at all, except for the implication that conveniently he lost a daughter, a wife, some female person somewhere in his life. You know, the most cliched of masculine motivations. Like, I don't know why he's actually helping her. Like, does she look just like his daughter? Like, what? I need more from this man. The minute she showed up at this fortress, they were like, come in and have a room while we discuss you. They didn't even like insist that she leave and go back to the village. She even has a bathtub. Like, whoa, ma'am, this fortress is, like, set up. Once again, she thinks of Knox only in terms of what Knox used to do for her, which is that she's like, man, I used to hang out with Knox all day, and now she's not here. What am I supposed to do with myself? Like, that's it. No concern, no thought for where Knox might be right now. Just, man, I miss having that friend around so that I wasn't lonely. Apparently she's being fed by, like a 12-year-old boy or something like that. I forget how old she said she was, but he's several years her junior, whatever that means. And he's, like, skinny. And I'm like, okay, well, if he's here, is he training? Because, like, if they think that, you know, she's going to be so much weaker because she's a girl, and let's be frank, she hasn't been doing any kind of training at her previous establishment, so of course she's going to be weaker. She would be weaker even if she was a boy at this point. If there are kids training here, have her train with them so she's not slowing down the adults. Just in case we were forgetting the incredibly heavy-handed themes that this author was trying to get across, Amarus is doing a little bit of reading, and it was some 400-page ballad about the King of Night and the Princess of Sun and the romance that divided the world in its misguided attempt at unity. Their love story had been a tragedy, ending in murder. Subtlety, who is she? We don't know her. It was both sloppy prose and dreadfully unbelievable. Huh. You just calling yourself out like that, Piper CJ. So, the character is stuck in this room for several days and she's bored, and we're getting a very thorough rundown of what she did in those days. And, like, I'm not necessarily opposed to knowing what she did in those days, but this author, as usual, is just drenching it in too many words. These characters have no depth, have no reasons. Here's a really difficult thing about being a writer. Of course, the characters are only ever doing what you want them to do, how you want the story to go. The key is convincing your reader that these characters are alive and making their own decisions, and the reader has to see why. Or if they don't see why, that needs to matter. The not seeing why needs to matter to the story as well. So finally, Audrin shows up and he's like, I've convinced them to hear you out. You have to go convince them. I'm sure it's going to be very difficult. And then he finishes up, like, he explains that they're also like an orphanage, just like Witchers. It's just like Witchers. He explains their culture. It's just Witchers. Then he says, just be yourself. You convinced me, didn't you? Yeah, but how? How did she convince you? Before she leaves to go talk to these guys, we get a very brief and clumsy hint at, I think, something we're going to see later. She's looking at a book that's got human and fae anatomy in it. And we get a lengthy description of one of the pictures she sees with a person with bat wings, which I think I have heard other people talk about this book. That's going to come up later. So we've got this really awkward and jammed in foreshadowing because, like, she was just told she gets to go talk to these men, but she's like, here, let me look at this last picture real quick. Don't mind the earbud. I put it in so I can listen to music while I read this, because, like, oh my goodness. Maybe I'll listen to the Witcher soundtrack, really get myself into the zone for this book. There we go, Witcher soundtrack. Let's do this. We're getting a 2-paragraph description of the table. So, it's a cool table, but it doesn't need this much. Like one sentence, one good sentence about the table. What does this mean? She's looking at the people at the table. He was a dark-haired man with the handsome, tactful face of a diplomat. What does a tactful face look like? Do I have a tactful face? Are we trying to say that this is a trans man? I just am confused by this sentence. So she's still looking at this guy. Amarus was unfamiliar with men, but irrespective of her lack of exposure, this person did not seem like any natural-born male. Does that mean he's a trans man? What are we trying to say? Sort of reminiscent of, like, Sarah J. Maas and her fairy books and how, like, there's this whole thing about, I've not read any of them, but I've watched a lot of reviews, this whole thing about maleness being very specific.
Yeah, I never figured this out. I don't think he's supposed to be a trans man. I don't know what she was trying to say with this. I think she was trying to imply that he looks fey, but she just did it in the most confusing way possible.
So we looked at one person who specifically had the face of a diplomat and did not look like a natural-born male. And then she just stops looking at people. Finally, she speaks. She literally took like 2 pages of just hemming and hawing and trying to encourage herself to speak, which was so fun to read. And then now she's finally like, oh yeah, I should probably say something. Oh, we're getting another guy description. This one is very beautiful. He also, he has brown skin, and guess how his hair is described? Go ahead, guess. If you guessed glossy, you are correct. This author has one description for black hair, and that is glossy. Briefly, this guy reminds her of Knox, and she very quickly, like, shakes the memory of Knox out of her head because, heaven forbid, she actually think about the friend that she abandoned for, like, 2 seconds. Ooh, but the hot guy is Faye. He has slightly pointy ears. So she spoke here at the top of the page. I am to the bottom of the page now, and it's just all more descriptions of people. This author is allergic to dialogue. Well, okay, anyone who is not an incredibly hot boy is just, like, ugly. Like, there's a guy who's older, like 60 or something like that, and she says his bovine qualities exacerbated when set against the muscular young man who opposed him. Wow! Bitch? Bovine?
He's an asshole.
Fortunately, one of the hot guys, there are several, this one is blonde, is, like, correctly pointing out that she's like the same size as a lot of the young boys that they train, so they don't have to make her separate armor or give her separate weapons. She can just use the stuff that they use for training young boys. Luckily, the hot Fae guy is taking her side. Of course, like, the hot boys are all taking her side. I knew very well, so we have an as you know moment. I served under a general who slew any enemy she met in battle for a century 3 times before you were born. Let's fix this sentence, shall we? Amarus felt herself blink slowly at the words the lovely man had spoken. Amarus blinked slowly at his words. Again, I would have just put another scene in here that could have done so much heavy lifting. Audrin is like, no, she's a warrior, look at her scars, because he didn't see the moment where she scarred herself. And, like, again, with one scene where they get into some sort of scuffle, we could have also had him seeing her, like, warrior spirit. This book could be doing so many things more successfully with just one more scene. And I know this book doesn't need more, but you know what? Take out so many of these superfluous sentences and needlessly long descriptions, and you've got room in the book for that scene. Like, for example, eliminate this whole paragraph of her thinking about how special she is and how much she'll fight and how she doesn't deserve that other life that she sent her friend off to.
What a bitch.
So it looks like they're going to vote her down, and then she uses her power again, her power to command, like she used on the bullies. It's really difficult, because I'm doing it in one of my own books, to deal with a character who has the ability to change other people's minds, because that is an inherently evil act, in my opinion. If you can force someone else to do your will, it's not a nice thing. And so having a main character who can do it, it's a really delicate tightrope to walk, and I'm curious to see how this author handles it, but I suspect probably not well. One thing's for sure, though, she did not get into this group with her own merit. She got in because she magicked them all. Now, of course, the hot Fae knows that she used magic on them, but he was already on her side, so he's just like, oh, that's cool.
Actually, it's gonna be super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, he's impressed. He's like, good job on using a spell on all of these men. Since all these dudes have been thoroughly magicked, they all are like, cool, we all agree that she's in, and then they're all gonna leave, and Amarus is gonna be left with sexy Fae boy. Amarus is confused, she doesn't really understand her powers, but I'm sure the sexy Fae boy will explain it to her. Of course her gift is super powerful and rare. So here we have the first suggestion that she used her powers on Audrin too. I didn't think there was a moment where it seemed like she had, but maybe there was. There was just a lot of description going on, and I kind of have been skimming it, so maybe at one point, maybe his gazing into the middle distance wasn't because she reminded him of his long-lost whatever, but because she had used her magic on him. Which is a reason, yes, but I would still much rather have had a scene where they come to a mutual understanding than her just using her power to get whatever she wants. However, I am also going to be counting this officially as main character behaving badly without fallout. Because this is multiple times now that she's already used her power and things have worked out well for her, even though it is not a nice thing at all to just force people to do what you want them to. So yes, go ahead and mark on your bingo board, main character behaving badly with no fallout. She's going to be paired with Ash.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was.
Who is also half fae, and therefore he is a bit resistant to her creepy powers. So she is a little bit disgusted by her power, which is good, and she says it's evil. And he says a gift is no more good or evil than the one wielding it. And of course she figures out that this is Samael, the oldest of all of them, but he's a hot guy. Because this book is not only heavily derivative of The Witcher, but also of, like, Sarah J. Maas. Although she's not the only one. I don't know why, but there's this trend of, like, super old but super sexy beings. For a while it was like a vampire thing, but it has branched out into a lot of other hot creatures that you could meet. We've head-hopped to the Hot Fae so we can get a history lesson, info dump about the mountain, about how the Fae and the reavers used to work together, and all of this because I don't think that the author wants to bother having this explained in dialogue because she does not like dialogue. She asks why Audryn was near Farley, and this guy's like, there have been some weird monsters in the area. The church sent us to investigate, and of course, he tells her, you're not like any fae I've met, and I've been around for some time. Can we mark this? Can we mark not like other girls, but like not like other fae? Also, as a parting thing, he tells her not to use her gift in the fortress or he will kick her out. And it says she almost choked on her nod. How do you choke on a nod? So she wanders into the training area by herself, and after staring at it for about a page and a half of description, the other half fae, Ash, is there, and he gets her attention. He is her age, or appears her age, so maybe a little bit more appropriate of a love interest. Yes, this is a bisexual book from my understanding, so any of these hot guys are just as much of an option as Knox. Oh my gosh, this chapter is taking so long, I have almost run out of memory card. I had emptied the memory card before beginning this chapter. Alright, we're back. Oh my gosh, this is gonna take up so much space on my computer. Like, usually I wait until I'm halfway through the book to, like, start uploading the sections, but if they take up too much space, I'm going to have to start uploading them and just hope I can keep up. Alright, we've described this kid's eyes like 3 times. Now Ash is calling her Snowflake. Apparently that's just something that you call pale people, because, like... Now, finally, when this guy calls her Snowflake, for the first time, we get more than just like a passing thought of Knox. She remembers all the stuff that Knox has done for her, and like, she's actually thinking about it. It's still very self-serving, but it's way more thought than she's given to Knox this entire time. Yeah, finally we get a moment where she goes, they'd meant to run away together, instead Amarus had left her alone. This selfish bitch has just realized, just now, even though she had days alone in a room to think about it, she has just realized that she totally left Knox behind to be screwed over. Also, she realized that she probably accidentally used her power on Knox. I thought it would be pretty clear when her power was being used, like it was against the boys, it was very obvious, but apparently we have to look out for whenever she tells somebody to do something, because that's her using her power. Because apparently she also, in telling Knox to wait for her, just like in passing, used her power. I thought she had to be like more emotionally focused on it, but I guess not. Also makes Amarus even more of an asshole now that it took her this long to realize, and also she used her power. Granted, she didn't know she was using her power, but she used her power on her girlfriend and completely screwed her over. She decides she's just not going to think about Knox anymore, of course, because this author likes to describe things. She describes it as her locking her thoughts of Knox away like a kraken in a cage. Of course, much more flowery and with many more sentences than that. She basically decides that after she's gone through all of her training and everything, she'll go back and find Knox. Like, oh gosh, thanks, don't rush. If this is supposed to be like an epic love story for the ages about 2 women who will always find each other, I am just not feeling it. She feels guilty for a hot second, then decides that that's bad because it'll make her too emotional and she just needs to focus on her training. finding out a little bit about Ash. I don't know if any of this matters. His mother was human and she died. His father is Fae and he's off working for the reavers in some dangerous part of the kingdom. Alright, we have made it through that chapter, and just glancing at the next chapter, it's also going to be an Amarus chapter. Why? Why is Knox even in this book? She's so unimportant to the author, clearly. At least right now. Maybe the author will get bored of Amarus and move back over to Knox. She parted ways with the cute boy, and she went back to her room where she had a hot bath because, like, they have amazing plumbing inside this mountain. And she wrote down on a piece of paper all of the names that she knows for some reason back from the orphanage, and here, all the names that she's learned, and she has hers and Knox's name, and she drew, like, an arrow between them, like they're some weird parts of a family tree or something. I don't really know what's going on with that. But anyway, we have made it through that doozy of a chapter, and the next one does not look quite as long, so that will be nice. But the one after it also appears to be an Amarus chapter. I'll see you for the next chapter. Nigel, are you sitting on my bookmark? Where's my bookmark, buddy? Maybe I'm sitting on my bookmark. Getting comfortable. Gonna read some of this book. Play some bad book bingo. Still no bingo. I don't know if we're gonna quite be able to fill the board, but I am still hopeful that we will get a bingo. I think we're so close to everyone praises the main character, so we could go diagonally from the upper leftmost corner. As long as we get confusing plot or no plot, which this book has not really had a plot yet. And then fat equals evil, I think we could still get very easily in this book. So I can definitely see us getting a bingo going that way. We can also go straight down if we can get baddies have terrible plans. And again, once again, confusing plot or no plot in sight. So fun story, I brought my camera with me. This week we were at the new house working on renovations, and I brought my camera with me because I was like, well, if I have a little free time or I want to take a break, I could do some read-along. I brought the camera, but not the book. Because I'm smart. Alright, chapter 9. I forget how long this one is. It's like 15 pages, so not the 30 that we usually get. So let's go. Chapter 9. I should have also put I hate the main character on the list, because, I mean, that doesn't really make it a bad book, but that is fast becoming a feature of my read-alongs, is me hating the main character. Gotta turn this light on so I can see. So we start out with a whole expositional paragraph about, like, the pain of training and how training was so tough. And then it cuts back to the dawn of her first morning of training. So get rid of that first paragraph. Eliminate it. If we are not going to cut out some of her training montage, then why would you tell us that it was difficult? Let us experience that. Right away, it definitely sounds like we are just cribbing from Witcher. I'm recognizing several of the apparatus that we see in the Witcher show when, what's her name? Blonde girl goes to train.
And breathe, damn it! You're panting like a dying mammoth!
Apparently these guys don't warm up. They get, like, straight into running down narrow rails and stuff like that. I've already been told 3 times in 1.5 pages that the run takes place first thing in the morning. Again, 3 different ways, same information. We're getting an info dump about this narrow trail that the guys like to run up and down every morning. It's the morning run, as we have previously established, which happens in the morning. First thing in the morning. Every morning. It's the morning run. Anyway, rather than letting us go on the run with Amarus, we're just being info dumped about the run. I mean, at least she is having a training montage. She's not automatically the best at everything. I'm sure she's going to be. Like, after this painful training montage, I'm sure she's going to be, like, better than all of the men. We'll get there. But hey, at least she's not, as the bingo card warns us of, immediately good at a high skill activity. We're also told, again, this could be maybe a conversation she has with him. We're told that she feels guilty for holding Ash back because he doesn't have a good opponent, because she sucks. Fortunately, Ash is just, like, awesome, and he has no problem with how much she sucks, and he's always, like, good-natured and forgiving. This is confusing. So they're sparring, and he says, "Move your feet, Ayla." Or Isla, I'm not really sure. Ash had shouted as he stood over her, cursing her in the southern dialect, settling on insulting her as an oak tree. I think, it took me 3 times reading this, trying to figure out what it meant. I think what it means is, Ayla or Isla means oak tree in the southern dialect, But, like, what a confusing way to tell us that. Apparently he decided his nickname for her is Isla, or Ayla, whatever. Oak tree. Apparently, after lunch, everyone else just has the rest of the day free. After lunch? So, like, you mean to tell me that they cram their morning run, and then all of their sparring and other types of practice, archery, all of that stuff, into the morning, and then they can do whatever they want with the afternoon? Of course, the main character does not get a day to herself. She has to go study poisons and tonics, and basically she has to build up her experience points so that later she can be the very best at everything. Just like witchers, reavers take on tasks throughout the kingdom alone, so she has to learn to take care of herself, because, you know, teamwork is for suckers. I'm curious if this is going to be a plot point later, or if this is just a holdover from, like, the video games or whatever. She's, like, being taught how to recognize poisons and what things are safe to eat, etc., and she asks, isn't there a magic item or something I could use to do this for me? And Audrin says, probably, but spelled objects are exceptionally difficult to make and even harder to come by. So we're learning about spelled objects that could help her with this. Are we going to encounter one later, or is this just like a video game item that, like, the author is like, you know, in the video games, there's items that do this, but they're super hard to find? I'm curious which it's going to be. We learn a little bit more about demons. I don't know what the demons are in, like, the video game or the stories, but in this, the demons have to be cut into very small pieces to be killed because they can reconstitute themselves, so they can't truly be killed. Sort of like a vampire kind of situation. Like, you have to cut it up and, like, bury the head separately. Oh, we're just being told it. This as well. Her surrogate, referring to Audrin, it just says, her surrogate father figure explained. Like, okay, we're just going there, huh? Like, now that she's gotten to the mountain, it doesn't sound like she has much to do with him, except for apparently she does, and he's her father figure already. Does he know that? Does he know that you've just decided that he's your father figure? These reavers also kind of remind me of Grey Wardens, in that she's learning about Brel, the other child here, and he doesn't speak, and she finds out that he was born with magic, and his superstitious parents freaked out and cut his tongue out, and then he was discovered by the reavers and, like, taken on as a ward, and it's also very reminiscent of the Grey Wardens. I don't know, again, I'm not as familiar with Witcher as I could be, but I don't know if it's, like, the same for both, or if this author's also picking a little bit from other stories, but I'm assuming it's Witchers and Grey Wardens just have that in common. Oh, we have the makings of the very best like no one ever was. Over the months, Amarus proved herself to be a sponge. She absorbed knowledge, tactics, and skills each and every day. She would learn any skill, craft, or technique from anyone at the Reeve who would give her the time of day. Even Graham begrudgingly let her into his forge a time or two to show her how he hammered out the weapons and made their blades from molten steel. Yeah, so we are getting our setup for her just being good at everything further down the line. I've seen this many a time before. Some authors think that if you give a training montage, then your character can just be good at everything further down the line. But even people who do a lot of work and a lot of training are not good at everything. There are always things that they're just gonna not be as skilled with, not as interested in. And then we have a time jump, a huge time jump. We go from her having been training for a few months to her 3rd year, and we don't even make it a new chapter. It's just a little time jump here, and all of a sudden it's been 3 fucking years. And then the chapter just ends with, by the time Amarus was 18, she was ready to take the oath as a full-fledged reaver. So by 18, she is fully trained and good at everything. So even though she started out completely sucking, her growth is very, rapid, I feel. Like, most of these people would be pretty stunned that she went from, like, 15 to 18 and was suddenly ready to take on being a full-fledged reaver. Hey, my memory card's almost out of space, so this chapter finished at perfectly the right time. Do you think, predict now in the comments, do you think that she's just going to be good at everything now whenever she needs to be down the line? I think it's going to turn out to be that way, but we'll find out. Still don't understand what happened to Knox or why Knox is even in this story when the author clearly doesn't care about her anymore, but maybe we'll find out soon. Anyway, see you for the next chapter.
Tia, did you hear the news? Tell her. Oh, tell her, Big Daddy.
Amanda, Unicorn Jenny, Celia, Neon, Taya, Alyssa, Rita, Deborah, My96, Afra, Melissa, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Merween, Kit, Light Julie, Belle, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Ray, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, Sarah, Ashley, and Hidden Glade. Thanks again for all your help. All your help is really big news.